Welcome to Owl Books. Part 4 of the book Mini Habits. The strategy of mini habits. It's not what we do once in a while that shapes our lives. It's what we do consistently. Anthony Robbins. The mini habit strategy is forcing yourself to take 1 to 4 stupid small, strategic actions every day. These actions are too small to fail, and too small to skip for special occasions. They serve dual purposes, to spark you to do more, and to become mini habits. Now we'll look at how the mini habit strategy generally applies the principles we've learned thus far. The specific step-by-step instructions of the mini habit strategy come 2 chapters after this one. Using willpower the mini habits way. There was a study on ego depletion that found some correlation between believing willpower is limited and willpower becoming limited. 21 Those who didn't believe their willpower had a limit appeared to last longer in ego depletion activities at first. This appears to be a strike against having mini habits, because they're designed around the assumption that willpower is limited, as shown in the meta-analysis. But let me explain why mini habits are a failsafe against either scenario. If willpower is truly limited, then mini habits preserve it by starting small. But say that willpower is only limited by our belief that it's limited. What would that mean for mini habits? It's great news. You'll believe you have unlimited willpower with mini habits because they require almost no willpower. So in the case that you're bursting at the seams with willpower energy, mini habits will get you started and allow you to make great bonus progress. And in the case that you're completely exhausted and out of willpower, mini habits will get you started anyway and allow you to make the most of your capabilities at the time. The belief that you can take action no matter what is built into this theory, and it has not failed me a single time. Not once has my willpower been insufficient to complete a mini habit. Now, I want to highlight again the 5 main causes of ego depletion found from the 83-study meta-analysis mentioned earlier. The biggest 5 ego depletion drains were found to be, in no particular order: effort, perceived difficulty, negative effect, subjective fatigue, blood glucose levels. Let's examine how all 5 of these willpower threats are mostly or completely nullified by mini habits. Effort. Mini habits require very little actual effort. You're going to be doing 1 push-up, writing 50 words, reading 2 pages, or other very easy tasks. The subsequent bonus effort from overachieving is variable, meaning some days will be more productive than others. This is a natural structure that greatly reduces the chance for burnout. I've often planned to write 50 words and written 2,000 words. Other times, I've written closer to 50 just to meet the requirement. The mini habits system is both rigid and flexible in strategic places. It's rigid in the beginning, forcing you to start, but it's flexible after that, allowing you to decide how much extra you want to do. The initial effort requires hardly any willpower. Result with mini habits: very little ego depletion. Perceived difficulty. Mini habits have almost zero perceived difficulty by design, a primary benefit that compounds when you do extra. Remember when I talked about the big mountain that my 30-minute workout was to me? That workout had a very high perceived difficulty. My sense of the difficulty was greater than the actual difficulty. But when I decided to start with 1 push-up and continued in that fashion, the perceived difficulty dropped substantially. Setting mini goals is the best way to drop the perceived difficulty in any project. Once you start and are free to continue, your perceived difficulty will be much lower due to the psychological impact of having already started. Just like in physics, the greatest inertia comes before the start of motion. Once you're in motion, everything gets easier as a result of momentum and increased motivation. Starting, even in a small way, also brings your mind into reality, and this is important. Before you take action, your mind can only imagine what a particular behavior would be like. My initial projection of a 30-minute workout was like scaling Mount Everest. It was wrong. When it comes to activities that require physical or mental effort, it's extremely common to overestimate how difficult they are. After I completed my 30-minute workout from force starting with 1 push-up, I realized how absurd my initial perceived difficulty was. Result with mini habits: very little ego depletion, even as you continue beyond your original target. The reason starting is the hardest part is because it carries the brunt of the weight of the commitment. Once we start, we feel as if we need to finish our original intention to count it as a success. Result with many habits, very little ego depletion, even as you continue beyond your original target. The reason starting is the hardest part is because it carries the brunt of the weight of the commitment. Once we start, we feel as if we need to finish our original intention to count it as a success. This is why we tend not to start a project that intimidates us. We'd rather not start if we won't finish. This is why many habits are so easy. The total intention is so small, there's no risk of quitting too early. By starting small and entering the reality of doing the work, your mind will see that one small step is not as difficult as it first seemed, and that taking the next step isn't difficult either. Negative effect simply means the experience of unpleasant feelings. It clearly played a role in the chocolate and radish study. Participants were tempted by the sight and smell of chocolate and were given the less desirable radishes. Being tempted with chocolate only to be denied even a taste was a very negative experience, perhaps more than we'd think. Imagine someone presenting you with cookies and then withholding them. As many habits are for adding good things, negative affect is less relevant unless your action is directly replacing another pleasure. Eating radishes alone won't deplete willpower, for example, but when juxtaposed against chocolatey goodness, you bet they will. Result with many habits, typically no ego depletion. Even if you're replacing a pleasure with a mini habit, the commitment is so small that you won't feel negative effect from it. More often, you'll be replacing time-wasting behaviors with beneficial ones, which induces a positive feeling. Subjective fatigue. This is an interesting one, isn't it? It doesn't say fatigue, it says subjective fatigue, implying that we're not completely objective in our assessment of our own fatigue. It turns out that willpower is a battle of the mind, and according to some of these top willpower drainers, the battle appears to be between the perception of your strength relative to your task. Many habits thankfully come with a mini amount of subjective fatigue. Subjective fatigue depends on many factors, and a big one is how you see yourself stacking up against your goal. I've noticed that when my goal is large, my subjective fatigue worsens. This is logical, as the mind looks ahead to the upcoming work and perhaps feels the impact early. A recent study found that our imaginations are so powerful that they can change what we physically see and hear in the real world. 22 So it is not at all a stretch to think that expecting a heavy workload can impact our energy levels too. This idea was also supported by researchers in the meta-analysis, who noted, expecting further acts of self-control exacerbated the effect of ego depletion. I noticed that when my goal became just one push-up, my subjective fatigue shrunk. In fact, I felt I had plenty of energy to do a single push-up, and the thought that I could easily do something, albeit small, was energizing. Result with many habits. Nothing can completely take away subjective fatigue, but many habits mitigate it very well. In relation to your mini goals, you may feel a sense of empowerment and energy. Even when I've been exhausted subjectively, I've still felt sufficiently energized to just read 2 pages or write 50 words. If you're wondering about the value in only doing that much, it's high and it's covered later. Blood glucose levels. Glucose, sugar, is your primary energy source. If you have low glucose in your blood, you're going to feel very tired. If it's dangerously low, you can even pass out. Your blood sugar levels are determined by genetics, diet, and lifestyle. As for many habits, they are independent of your blood sugar, but they can help to preserve it by being the most efficient way to spend your willpower energy. It is far more mentally energy efficient to break things down into small components that are easily, mentally digested and less stressful. The goal of losing 100 pounds in a year is a constant energy drain and burden. And with this goal, it's possible to lose 50 pounds and feel like a failure. Why would anyone be interested in that? One workout feels like a drop in the bucket, and it is in the grand scheme of your massive goal. It's hard to feel good after a workout when it represents almost nothing compared to your goal. With many habits, though, willpower is preserved as much as possible. Every step you take feels like success, and going beyond your goal feels even better than that. It's a system that makes you feel like a winner, because people who feel like winners act like winners. Result with many habits. While blood sugar levels are independent of many habits, the fact that they are energy efficient, willpower efficient, and empowering psychologically, preserves blood sugar as much as any goal habit strategy could. And if you're tired from low blood sugar, many habits give you the best chance to take action anyway. How many habits expand your comfort zone? Right now you have a comfort zone. Imagine it as a circle. You're most comfortable inside of this circle, but outside of it are some of your desired goals. Outside the lines, you might see yourself physically fit and weighing less. You might envision books you've written or books you'd like to read, a happier version of you with fewer negative thoughts, a version of you who cooks more meals at home, or whatever else you're interested in improving. These are outside of your comfort circle because they require some discomfort to achieve due to straying from your basal ganglia's current routines. The common way people go about this change is diving in and trying a whatever it takes to succeed strategy. This is like sprinting well outside of your comfort circle and fighting to stay there. That's when your subconscious brain says, "This is interesting, but I'm really uncomfortable with this huge change," and it forces you back inside your comfort circle when your motivation and willpower can no longer support you out there. Many habits are like walking to the outer edge of your circle and taking one step outside of the boundaries. You're in less comfortable territory here, but not by much, because you know taking one step back will put you back inside your comfort circle. And maybe for the first few times, you will step right back inside your comfort circle, only meeting your mini requirement. But when you continue to step outside the circle, your subconscious will get comfortable with it and your circle will expand. We're talking about a mini habit forming here. This expansion, unlike the sprints in the prior example, can permanently change your boundaries, and it is the magic bullet of mini habits. Because while I hope you get the urge to explore your outer boundaries after you take that first step outside, even if you don't, you will eventually form a comfortable habit of taking that first step into a new behavior. This serves as the best possible foundation for further steps and personal growth in that area. In the case of push-ups, the common mini habit is to do one every day. This small step creates a much broader effect than you'd think, because not only will you become comfortable with the idea of doing one push-up, you'll also be more comfortable with push-ups in general and with doing them every day. This is going to make scaling up a breeze. Really. And this is the absolute worst-case scenario of the mini habits system, in that you never do extra. Chances are that you will do extra sometimes. And the reason relates to basic physics. Newton's first law states that 1. An object that is at rest will stay at rest unless an external force acts upon it. 2. An object that is in motion will not change its velocity unless an external force acts upon it. Can you see how this relates? Once you take that first step, you are officially in motion. You will find, as I have, and as Newton's law suggests for physics anyway, that once you get started it is almost as hard to stop as it is to keep going. Add to this that nothing is more motivating and inspiring than seeing yourself take action. Put it together and we get a new equation: one small step plus desired behavior equals high probability of further steps. The two moments of resistance. I remember living in Virginia with a cat. When it snowed, we naturally wanted to see how our indoor cat liked the snow. Cats don't like water, but do they like fluffy, frozen water? No. First attempt, we walked out into the yard and tossed her into the snow. Failure. She would stand there motionless and confused for 3 seconds, and quickly race back inside in disapproval. Second attempt, later day. We placed her on the outskirts of the snow. Success. She actually walked around in it and explored some. Your brain is just another cat in the snow, and you can quote me on that because I love out of context quotes. Spring massive changes on it and it will run back to its comfortable routines. But introduce changes gently and in small doses, and it just might be curious, not scared, to explore them more. Your brain is programmed to resist change, but most of that resistance comes at two particular moments. Resistance before action. Think of yourself as a ball resting on a track, or as Newton's law states, an object that is at rest. Motivational techniques insist that you get motivated before you move, but isn't it easier just to move forward 1 centimeter and let momentum help you out? Yes, it's much easier. Move yourself slightly forward to get rolling. Once you're rolling, the equation changes to a more favorable physics formula. An object that is in motion will not change its velocity unless an external force acts upon it. Starting is the hardest part, but that doesn't mean it has to be hard to start. Hardest is relative. When the first action is just a nudge, initial resistance shrinks. Once you take action, there is a second wave of resistance. The strength of this second wave depends on how much of an impact your first step had, which varies. Resistance to do more. The mini habits strategy addresses the first instance of internal resistance by requiring small steps to start and by making the total requirement too easy to fail. It keeps you from getting overwhelmed and racing back to your old routines like a cat in the snow. But once you start, there's another wave of resistance. In my experience, taking that first step often completely shatters this second level of resistance, especially once you have had some practice. But starting out, it was far less frequent. Can you guess why? Think about the brain. This resistance isn't a mystery. It's a subconscious conflict with my typical behavior. The basal ganglia can be fooled into not resisting the first step, but it still knows what it wants when you attempt to do more. So, when the first step isn't enough to break the resistance, you can take another. The basal ganglia doesn't care to defend against small steps, only drastic changes. By changing slowly and taking it one step at a time, you're playing by your own brain's rules. So when I kept setting mini goals in the 1 push-up challenge, my brain tolerated it. But once I thought about doing even a 10-minute chunk, my brain said, no, absolutely not. Play video games, young man. You're grounded. So I said, but can I just get the exercise mat out? And it said, yes. You know the rest. If you're ever in a situation where you'd like to do more than your minimum requirement, simply continue to use small steps if necessary. But do not come to expect this every time. Your requirement is small for all of the reasons we're discussing. You don't want to jeopardize your long-term success for a short-term gain. I don't want to scare you into doing too little either, so I'll just say this: if your requirement is small on paper and in your mind, you're fine. Now, let's take a closer look at how mini habits work in the moment. Mini habits in the moment. We just talked about the 2 occasions that we meet resistance, before and during a task or project. Now I want to discuss both common forms of resistance, mental and physical. Motivation can't overcome resistance consistently. It is the sometimes solution. The slogan for motivation should be the quote from the movie Anchorman: 60% of the time, it works every time. It isn't just motivation though. Using willpower recklessly is equally ineffective. Smart willpower management is key to personal development as smart money management is key to financial success. People working normal, relatively low-paying jobs have become millionaires through smart money management, while super athletes making millions of dollars every year have gone bankrupt. If you don't plan your action strategy out, you'll flip-flop between poor willpower and motivation strategies, and end up frustrated. Here's how many habits overcome mental and physical barriers. I'll use exercise as the example, since it is such a common desire. Scenario number 1, you have energy to exercise, but don't want to do it. Mental barrier. Since we're going to skip motivation, we're left with using willpower. But instead of saying you have to do a full workout, we'll just say that you have to do 1 push-up. It's required. As you have energy in this scenario, this isn't a big deal. And once you start, you're going to find the motivation kick in most of the time. You don't want to exercise right now in this scenario, but you do want to exercise generally in life. These are conflicting desires between present moment feelings and your life values. When you do that first push-up, your life values will often inspire you and overtake your prior hesitation. If not, you may have to set a few more micro goals like I did in the first one push-up challenge, but as you lead yourself along, your mind will adjust to what the body is doing. And each small step you take will make your long-term healthy perspective more appealing. In the willpower section, we saw how willpower depends greatly on the perception of the difficulty of the task, and when you start stupid small, the perceived difficulty and willpower cost drop drastically. Once you take the first step, your brain is forced to calculate the true difficulty of what a full workout would be like, instead of a biased, lazy brain projecting it to be torturous. If you've ever found yourself thinking it wasn't so bad after a workout or trying a new experience, you're already familiar with this phenomenon. Now what if you go overboard with willpower even after starting small, and burn yourself out? This is the situation that life coaches are terrified of. What if you simply don't have the energy to do it? What if you have a headache? While I'm not promising this as a panacea for all action-stopping ailments, I do believe it is the single best action-based strategy. If anything can work, it's this. Scenario number 2, you don't physically feel like exercising because you're tired. Physical barrier. We think of tiredness as a physical barrier, but it's also a mental barrier. Having no energy usually means you have zero motivation. I've overcome this exact scenario countless times with many habits. For example, more than 1,000 words of this book were written while I had a headache. Not just that, but I was tired and wanted to go to sleep. I was completely unmotivated to write, had very little energy, and I did my 50 words anyway, which grew into 1,000 somehow. In many ways, it's harder not to do a single push-up than to do one. The challenge is so easy that your pride enters the equation. I may be stubborn and exhausted right now, but come on, I can do that. I encourage you to frequently remind yourself of the absurdity of not being able to meet your mini habit requirements. I was productive with a headache because I started small. It seemed literally impossible at first based on how I felt. And in the past, there was no way I would even attempt to write in those circumstances with such a great excuse. I would have cut my losses and gave the standard promise to myself, toto it later. As I age, I realize that now is yesterday's later, and that later is a bad plan. It was the perfect storm though, headache, late at night, and dead tired. I swear my bed was giving me pickup lines. Your REM cycle is beautiful, Stephen, it said. My glazed eyes gazed lustfully at the warm covers, and I replied, in a minute, honey. My requirement was so easy that I decided to take a minute to meet it and then quit. Instead, I wrote 1,000 words. I was astonished. It was one of those moments when I realized how powerful this life strategy is. Can you see how many habits can make you feel unstoppable? Can you see why I'm confident that many habits can help nearly anyone add good habits? If I can perform in those circumstances, when I have weak willpower, then this strategy is a good one. The basis of this strategy rests not on my unique experience, but on the science of willpower. My experience coincides with the science. Many habits are designed for minimum willpower exertion and maximum momentum, the perfect scenario. Fitting many habits into your life. Are you busy? Do you frequently feel overwhelmed with everything you want and must do? A concern you should have with any system is how it fits into your life. Many habit books wisely recommend that you only pursue one habit at a time. This is due to our limited willpower being unable to handle too many habits at once. But who wants to dedicate 6 months to one area of their life and ignore the other things they want to improve? Habits are so valuable that it would be worth it, but it's frustrating to only focus on writing when you want to get in great shape too. This tension between your current focus and the other areas you want to improve can derail you. This is a huge, largely ignored problem that has been without a solution, until now. Many habits are so small and willpower efficient, that you can have multiple habits at once. Even busy and overwhelmed people can succeed with multiple mini habits. Look at mini habits as your day's foundation. These are things you must get done, but they only take a few minutes total to do. After that, you can do anything you want, whether it's bonus reps or other activities. It's completely flexible to fit your current lifestyle, but it's the crowbar of personal development because it can leverage an initially small habit in your life into something much bigger. Thank you for watching. If you like audio books, then please
subscribe my channel for more amazing content and hit the bell icon for updates.